If you're here listening or watching, it's because someone you know and care about and love is grieving. Maybe you're grieving yourself, or maybe it's a friend or a family member who's going through some sort of loss right now. It's overwhelming. You might not know what to say. You yourself may have never dealt with loss, and now you're kind of thrown into this world of trying to be a support system for something you might not fully understand. But I promise you, just by showing up here, you're already doing something incredible. Something that could change the course of your grief or your loved one's grief. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the And Also podcast. I'm your host, Madison. I'm very exhausted. Before we get into today's episode, which is a very, very, very special one, I just want to do a little disclaimer. I just worked a very long and very exhausting day at the funeral home. For those of you who might be new here, I am in school for mortuary science and becoming a funeral director, and I work at a funeral home where I'm kind of learning the trade in real time. So I'm exhausted, and I really wanted to get this episode out this week because there has been an uptick of people in my personal life who really need this as a resource, and I didn't want those people to go unsupported. If you don't know who I am, my name is Madison. I'm the host of the show, and I started this podcast when I lost my ex-partner of 6 years to suicide in 2022. And he was truly my best friend. He was the most foundational person in my life, and he means the world to me. And so I started this podcast to help other people who are going through their own grief experience to feel seen, to have community, and to just be able to hear other grief stories that might help to uplift them. Okay, so now that you know who I am and what all of this is for, the purpose of today's episode is to provide a comprehensive, practical guide to supporting someone through grief. In those initial moments when you get the news and you have to step up as a support system. You can also apply these things to your own grief if you're, going through your own experience. There's going to be do's and don'ts. There's going to be actionable items. There's going to be resources. And so this is going to be your go-to guide for all things grief and loss and being there for your loved ones. I've experienced many times where a friend will text me and say, so-and-so passed away. Or even, at work, I have people all the time looking for resources. And what do I do? What do I say? I don't know what to do. And so this video right here, this episode right here is going to be a full deep dive on all of that. So here is your reminder. If you have a friend who's grieving, if you came across this episode, don't be afraid to share this with a friend. And if you are that friend who got sent to this episode, I want you to know that no matter where you're at in your journey and your experience, you are never, ever alone. I know personally from my own grief, there are moments where it feels like there is absolutely no way to get out of the depths of the pain. I know it. I can bring myself right back there. And I want you to know that though things, are never going to be the same as they were before your loss, you will find the peace again. You will find the moments to live for again. Not all hope is lost. And that is hard to believe when you're in it. So I want you to do one thing for me today. Take my word for it. Take my word for the fact that day by day, things suck, but there will come a point where you feel like you can breathe. That doesn't mean the grief is gone. Doesn't mean you don't carry it, that you don't sit with it, that you don't feel it, that you don't hurt still. It just means you can breathe a little bit easier. So let's get into it. The first 24 to 48 hours of finding out of your loved one's passing or your friend's loved one's passing. Also, don't mind me, I'm going to crack open a drink. I haven't done the drink of the day, so I'm going to make this very quick. Today's drink is the Evolution Real Fruit Soda, strawberry vanilla. And you know me, I just love me a little fruity soda. I love anything, something in vanilla, cherry vanilla, strawberry vanilla. What else they got? Blueberry vanilla, whatever it is. I love it. So let's get into this. That just exploded. Oh, please don't. It went all over my face. All right. Y'all, that is so good. Okay, back to the episode. The first 24 to 48 hours. Immediate steps, okay? What do you say when you first hear the news? This is a tough one. I think, the standard is to just say, I'm so sorry, I'm here for you. And though that can be just a nice sentiment, I think if you really want to show the person that you care about them, I usually go for something like this. And by the way, any of the resources I provide, I'm going to put text outlines in the description box, okay? I'm going to give you everything you need. What do you say? First, I just want to say I am so, so sorry for your loss. I know right now, hearing that from so many people can be overwhelming. So I just wanted to let you know right off the bat that I am here for you across the board, whether it's, you need a distraction, or you need support, you need someone to just vent to talk about your person with, or you need help actually reaching out for help. I'm here for you every step of the way. And kind of just let that sit with them. And then, of course, I'll tell you what not to say. Don't say things like they're in a better place, they wouldn't want you to be sad. No, you need to reiterate to them and reassure them that everything that they're feeling is normal, it's valid, and you are here for all of it, the highs and the lows. If they're having a bad day, or if they're having a good day, or if they just need to talk, or if they just need to sit in silence, I want you to make that very clear to them in the early days so that they see you as someone that they can trust with their grief and with the vulnerable, uncomfortable feelings that come along with loss. I just want you to emphasize to your friend that you are present, you are available, and how important that is. I think something that we really need to remember as support systems of grieving people is that nothing we say or do will ever make them feel better. We go into grief as support systems trying to fix, trying to solve. And ultimately, the only thing that's going to fix or solve grief is if that person comes back to life. And we all know that's not happening. So I want you to acknowledge their feelings in every way. And I want you to say, no matter how you're feeling, it's okay. I know there's nothing I can do to fix this, but I know right now I can just be here for you. And I think when you acknowledge that, that their negative or sad or uncomfortable feelings are valid, that is when someone will feel safe enough to open up with you. You can also offer actionable support, say childcare, cooking, immediate tasks. If they have pets, let me take your dog for the weekend, or let me come over and make sure the cats are fed as you're figuring stuff out. Whatever actionable things you can do to help them. Maybe it's just giving them a ride to the funeral home. That's something they're struggling so bad to get themselves in the car, to even have the mental clarity to drive. Say, do you need a ride? I'll wait in the parking lot, or I'll sit in the funeral home with you if you need. Just offer actionable things. So I want to talk about the do's and don'ts of supporting someone in grief. And I truly think that this could be an entire, not only episode, but series in itself, because to this day, people say stuff to me that I'm just like, how do you even muster up the strength to say something so ignorant? And it can be frustrating and it can ruin relationships. So I want to make sure that you're equipped with the things that, at least in my experience, have been most helpful, and then some of the things that I think you should actively avoid doing. So some do's, like I said before, actively listening without trying to fix the pain. There is no solution. The only thing we can do is be there. Use their loved one's name in conversation. I have to say, my current boyfriend, Jake, he's really, really, really good at this. The other day we were at dinner and he knew I was feeling down about Regis. It was just a tough day. And so while we were at dinner, he said to me, Regis seemed like such a cool guy. Why don't you tell me about his personality? Just thinking about that brings tears to my eyes, because you always feel like a burden when you're talking about your deceased loved one. You feel like you're bringing the mood down. You feel like the dark cloud of the party. And it sucks. It sucks bad feeling that way. So if you can open that door for that person, that automatically lets them know, without you even having to say it, that you are a safe person that they can express freely to. You can see the person's face light up to know that you acknowledge their loss, in such a deep way, because some people are afraid to ever say that person's name again after the loss. People to this day, if I say Regis's name, they're like up in arms. They're frightened for, what I might say next, because it's uncomfortable. Grief is uncomfortable. So the people that do come up to me and say, oh, Regis would have loved this, or what do you think Regis would think of this? It means more than I'm sorry for your loss. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then also just validate their feelings without judgment. Something I hated in the early days, especially people finding out what happened and them coming up to me and saying things like, oh, I lost my grandma, when I was a teenager. And so I totally understand how you feel. That is not validating. That is frustrating. And we'll get kind of into that with the don'ts. But to validate someone's feelings, say, I've experienced grief before. And it might not be the same. I didn't know this person, or we had a different relationship. And I want you to know that no matter how you feel, I'm going to do my best to listen and to understand how you're feeling. You can relate back to your own experiences, but not in a way that feels belittling or invalidating to this person's grief. So validate their feelings without judgment. It's okay to cry. Let's cry together. We can sit on the couch. We can eat some snacks, and I'm just going to be here to listen to you. That is really what true good friendship is about. Being there for those times when someone needs you most and not judging them for any of the spectrum of emotions that comes with grief. So now we're going to get into the don'ts. Avoid toxic positivity. Everything happens for a reason. One door closes, another one opens. This stuff can be really hurtful because someone who's grieving is not thinking about their grief or this person's death opportunistically. They are not thinking what could be the greater cause of this. In fact, if they do think about that, it's more in a negative way. Like, how could this have happened? What would be the reason for something like this? It seems so sick and twisted. The toxic positivity is not helpful in grief. Just let people be sad. Let people feel things that hurt. That's part of the healing process. And then don't rush the grieving process. Don't push them into timelines. Don't push them into stages and waves and blah, blah, blah. Just let people feel how they're feeling that day. Every day in grief is going to be different, whether it's immediately after or 10 years down the line. Let people process in their own time and be there when they need you. There's also a lot of resources in terms of things you can offer to show that you are supporting. There are so many books about grief. I'm going to make a master list that'll be linked in the description box, as well as different podcasts, different online communities and creators, support groups in your area. Just books that show you that your grieving feelings are completely normal, and the process your brain is going through to wrap itself around the experience is completely normal. So let's talk more practical help and support. Here's some examples of some tangible support. We have organizing meals or errands. I know a lot of time with death, people's fridges will be stocked up for months. It might feel overwhelming in the moment. It might feel like, oh my God, here's this awful pain and all you can give me is a casserole. But truly, when it comes down to it, eating is super hard, especially cooking, especially even having the mental energy to figure out what to eat for people who are grieving. And so helping them access that easier, even though for them it might feel frustrating, it's keeping them alive. It's a lifeline. Running errands, picking up their prescriptions, picking up their kids from daycare or school if they need, helping them with their groceries, filling up their car with gas. And then, of course, it's assisting with funeral planning if needed, and if you feel close to that person that you can offer that sort of support. Legal logistics, helping them locate documents, say like, a spouse passed and you need to find the life insurance documentation. Help them gather those things and help them take breaks and help them rest without feeling guilty for that. I think the beginning of the grief experience is very blurry and very foggy for a lot of people, and they forget how to do basic self-care. Something also with this is when you reach out to a grieving person, I know it's very tempting to say, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. The thing with grief is that most of the time you have no idea what you need. So if you're going to reach out to support, I want you to reach out with something. not with, if you need me, I'm here. The initial, I know I said that earlier, but the initial text can just, have that as a general statement. But as time goes on, they're always going to say, I'm good. Thank you. I don't think we need anything at the moment, but maybe they do. I'd recommend showing up to their house with a cup of coffee and say, hey, let's go on a walk. Doing things that will help move them through this and will help to actually get them out of bed and get them on their feet. You don't know what they need for groceries, but you're at the grocery store and you want to grab, some bread, some eggs, some basics for them and just drop it off. Don't expect, to be let in. Don't expect this grandiose, like, oh, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Sometimes it's just leave it on their doorstep, ring the doorbell with a little note. Some people do like flowers, some people don't. I know I love having flowers in my house, and we do have a code with Feldhausen Florist. If you are local to the capital region and, want to send someone some flowers for any event, but especially for a sympathy bouquet. That code is in the description box, of course. There's also lots of apps for meal trains and community stuff like that. Even Facebook groups for grief and for support. Reach out to your local funeral home or the funeral home that the family is going to be working with and, give them a call or stop in and ask if they have absolutely any resources to offer a friend in need. So let's talk a bit about longer term support, because all of this stuff is, in the immediate, right? But let's be real, like grief does not end after the funeral ends. In fact, I think grief really sets in after the funeral ends. Your family goes home, you're not getting as many flowers or cards, and people sort of move on with their lives while you feel like you're drowning, like you're stuck. And so this period is very, 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 very important to step up and be that support system that the person really, really needs, but may not even know how to ask for. Something I really want you to do is, remember the death day, remember the person's birthday, milestones that might exist. Reach out on those really special, important days. I mean, we know the person is struggling on those anniversaries and those big, big milestone days, but also reach out on the days that aren't significant, just a random Tuesday, right? Those are the days where things can be really hard. I think with birthdays and death anniversaries and holidays, we expect the grief to hit, we expect to feel it. But it's the everyday that just kind of hits you out of nowhere that you don't expect. Don't hesitate to just reach out on a random day and say, I'm thinking of you and your mom or your dad or whoever it is that passed. You can also add, no need to reply, just thinking of you. And then, like I said before, offer specific plans. Hey, let's grab coffee next Wednesday. Hey, let's go have a walk in the park on Sunday morning. Outline it for them. Don't say, hey, do you want to hang out? Let me know when you're free. It's the last thing on someone's mind. So give them a time and place. Give them the activity that will help you to really get this person support and out of the house and in talking about the things that they're going through. And of course, Psychology Today is a great therapy directory that you can refer them to if they are looking into getting grief help, counseling, support. Also looking through their insurance company to see what local therapists, psychologists take their insurance is really helpful. Now, this is something I would not necessarily push on somebody because a lot of people are opposed to grief therapy. I certainly was, and it was pushed onto me, and it made me very, very resentful of a few people in my life. So it's something I want you to just keep in mind, that if someone's like, I want to get help, I want to start therapy, but I don't know where to start, then you can kind of refer them. But I wouldn't be like, hey, you should be in therapy because you're grieving. A lot of people don't want to do that, at least right off the bat. The first time I dealt with unexpected loss and grief, I was 16 and I didn't have access to the resources I do today. I didn't have the understanding of my own mental health, let alone what grief even was, let alone what life even was. I was 16 years old, but I did come across this really wonderful book. It's been almost 10 years since I read it. So, I don't know how it would necessarily impact me today as an adult, but I have gifted this book to many people. And that is It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. I really do want to read it again, but for me, what that book did was it taught me a lot about grief when I didn't know anything about grief. And it taught me that my feelings around grief were so normal. When the world is trying to tell you you're fine, pack it up, move on, put the feelings away, get back to work, get back to school, and you're just stuck. Reading a book like this can really help you feel less alone. And I think reading grief stories in general can help you feel a lot less alone. Another book that changed my life that was a recommendation from someone else who lost a friend to suicide was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This book was... There's no words to describe that book and how it changed my life in those early days of grief. So those are 2 books you could totally recommend to somebody amongst many more listed in the show notes. I think it's important to remember that no one just moves on from grief, and it's always present in every room with that person. If you know someone lost someone very close to them, just imagine them in every room, in every function, at every party, with grief walking right behind them. It's always there. Don't be afraid to quote unquote trigger the grief by bringing it up. It's always there. 9 times out of 10, if someone brings up your loss unprompted, it's going to have a way more positive effect than it would have a negative effect. For someone to be thinking about you and your lost loved one is such a powerful experience when you're grieving. So don't be afraid to bring it up. If you bring it up and you're scared that it's not going to go well, just give them an out. Say, we don't have to talk about this, but this reminded me of so-and-so, and just see where the conversation goes. I also think less is more with a lot of this stuff. If you're sitting with someone who just lost someone, we can tend to try to fill that empty, painful, silent space with just talking and trying so hard to find the right words. I want you to accept from the beginning there are no right words and that you are not going to fix this. You have 0 power of fixing this, but you do have the power to sit back, say less, and let that person speak more. That's going to be more healing than you trying to just talk and fill the space because the feelings are uncomfortable. And of course, a really important thing we always need to talk about whenever we discuss being a support system or a caretaker of any sort is, how do you support yourself in this? You cannot be a good support system to other people if you're not giving yourself what you need, if you're not filling your own cup. You have to acknowledge that this sort of support can be draining, and that if you need to take breaks, you're allowed to take breaks. I think being open and honest is important. And, just saying to your friend, hey, I know you're really feeling this right now. I want to be here for you. Can we find some time in a couple days where we're able to sit down and sort of hash this out? That's kind of setting a boundary without being like, hey, I'm struggling too, so give me space. It's just a way of saying, give me space and seek support if you need. That this is what friendships and human connection is for, is to be there for one another. So be open about your feelings. It's all about time and place. It's all about, making sure you're also allowing yourself space for that. Maybe it's not with the grieving person, but it could be with another trusted friend or a partner. As corny as it is, and as much as it used to really piss me off when people would say this, meditation is helpful. Even if that just means 5 minutes of sitting and just breathing, or 5 minutes of journaling, or stretching your body, or I like to do floor time. I like to just lay on the hard floor on my back with my eyes closed and, lose every single trace of a thought in my mind. There's, of course, also support groups for caretakers and secondary grief. So that's something you can keep in mind. There's also some great apps out there. I am not sponsored. I wish I was, but like Headspace, Calm. There's another one called Open, like all sorts of meditation and just, self-care sorts of apps. I think also just taking time away from technology is super helpful, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed by grief and just, everything feels like a lot. Putting your phone down, taking a hot shower, a bath, and of course, moving your body. Go to the gym, take a walk, hang out with your pets or your kids, whatever you need to do to decompress. It's going to look different for everybody, but it's important that you make time to do that. And I want to remind you of that today. The most important thing to remember here is to be present, listen, and show up in ways that are meaningful, that are more than, please don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate. Here for you. Make it meaningful. Show up with a cup of coffee. Send them a book to their house. Write them a letter letting you know they're thinking of them. Whatever you need to do, cook them a meal. Grief is a very, very, very long road, a road that doesn't really end. It just kind of turns and twists, but your support can really, help make that journey a lot easier, and it can be a light for someone in the darkest moments. I made this guide here today because when I was in the darkest time of my grief, I don't think I could have felt any more alone than I did. I've always been the strong person, have always been the older sister figure. And so when I was in a place that dark and that intense, I don't think anyone had ever seen me that way before. And I don't think anyone knew what to do with me. I felt like the elephant in every room. I felt like I could not feel that pain the way I needed to help my processing. And I don't want that for anybody else. I don't want anyone to go through grief and feel like they can't open up, like they can't say that person's name, like they can't still have them in their everyday life because they're scared that people might think they're weird. So if you are a friend of somebody that is grieving, I want you to remember that you have the power to create a space that can quite literally change the course of somebody's life. And that is so powerful. I want to share one last thing with you before I end this episode. This is something that really stuck with me, and I'm going to link the audio version of this poem in the show notes, but also the actual poem. And I read this poem at Regis's Celebration of Life, and I want you to just listen to this poem. I want these words to stick with you, and I want you to use this poem itself as a resource. It is one of the most touching, beautiful things I've ever heard and read in my life. It's by Francis Delario. Incredible, incredible poet. So it's called After a Suicide. I know it's suicide, but this can truly apply to grief. Sure, things are mundane mostly, and terrible as often as they're not. I have no metaphor about flowers, nothing about the things that have grown and died to help it make sense, nothing to muffle the ache. And so the poet is useless, a failure with so little to offer you. But here, when you're knee deep and it's just too much, know that the voice in your head is in mine too, all the time talking us straight toward the worst. And so in this way, we're here together. And so in this way, you're never alone. Stay. Moves me to tears every single time. There's nothing more I can say. That poem it says it so perfectly. So that concludes this episode, all about supporting someone through grief. And I hope you learned something, and I hope that this helps you navigate the uncertainty of having a friend who's grieving. But you guys, before we close out today's episode, I do have my mental health update with SHEA from Rooted Within. So if you didn't know, at the end of every episode during my 8-week program with SHEA Opella, I do an update on the work that we're doing. So earlier this season of the podcast, I sat down with SHEA, and she has a inner alignment coaching program. And I decided to take the challenge and do an 8-week program with her to work through childhood trauma and grief. And you guys, I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but this is my 7th session out of 8. I cannot believe it. I truly, girl, I did not think I would get this far, okay? And I feel like we're just sort of tying a lot of loose ends right now. So this session, SHEA had given me a reactivity worksheet to figure out my pain bodies and how I sort of process things through my brain. Like, how does it work? Where are my triggers? Where am I projecting? Where am I being judgmental? All sorts of things for how I'm processing experiences and emotions. And that has been super helpful to lay out and see in front of me. You don't even recognize the habits that you form in your mind, the way that you naturally think, and how they're impacting your ability to cope. Also, before this session happened, a pretty major event happened in my life with a close friend that was very traumatizing for me. And I'm so thankful that everyone is okay. But there was just a major event that happened that traumatized me. And as it was happening, in real time, I recognized this is going to be trauma, because it was so scary and it was so intense. And so this was something we really worked through in the session because it was actively happening. So it's nice because we talk about things that are actively going on and unfolding, but we also get into the depths of the inner workings of my brain. Yeah, just preparing for the last session is kind of bizarre to think about. It's already been almost 8 weeks and I truly feel so different. I've spent years of my life in therapy and never was I able to feel such a huge shift in the way that I think. And I truly believe it's because everything that we address in these sessions, whether it's major traumas or just little things that happen or just, reactions or thought patterns, it's literally wild to me, how much we can actually talk about and work through and feel in the body and, find root causes of and work to rewire. And I think that's the thing that for me never worked with therapy. It's just like I talked about it. The therapist is like, yeah, that's totally valid. Like you're really self-aware. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so now what? And this is just giving me that next step of, okay, I know the things. I know that, this experience is related to this childhood trauma or this experience is related to this past experience, but now what? What do I do with it? And I think having that in play has changed the game for my healing and being able to process and feel and understand my brain. And I know I said this last time, but this 8-week program with SHEA, it's truly changed my life. Like, I can't even joke. My habits are different. The way that I think about myself is different. The way that I organize my life is different. My calmness, my ability to let go, my ability to listen to what I need is so different. And that is something I cannot put a price tag on. So yeah, just another massive thank you to SHEA for everything and for listening to me and for being there for some of my most vulnerable moments. It's really great to be able to do this healing work and share it with you guys and also give you guys the opportunity to, know about something like this and maybe get help if you are looking for something like this. SHEA's information is always in the description box. And I'm very excited to share my last week with you guys and kind of my conclusions, but I will be doing a follow-up episode with SHEA after I'm done with the program so you guys can hear her perspective on my journey. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Of course, don't forget to share it with that person that's on your mind that made you click this episode in the first place. Thank you for listening, as always, for being here to support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. And if you're listening on audio platforms, be sure to add this to your playlist, send it to a friend, give the show a 5-star rating. It really helps us out. And of course, as always, I will see you next week on the And Also podcast. Take care, and we'll talk soon.